There are moments in life when nothing seems to move on the surface, when the days feel quiet, the nights feel heavy, and the world around you appears unchanged, yet deep within the unseen realms something powerful is unfolding, because when God is aligning your paths in silence, He does not announce it with noise or urgency, He does not rush the process or explain every detail, instead He works quietly, deliberately, and perfectly, removing what no longer belongs, rearranging what must remain, and preparing you for connections, opportunities, and destinies that your current version could not yet sustain. And this silence you are experiencing is not absence, it is intention, it is not delay, it is design, and it is not punishment, it is protection, because God often chooses silence when the work He is doing is too sacred to be interrupted by doubt, fear, or outside interference. And during this season you may feel disconnected from people who once felt close, confused about paths that once felt clear, or uncertain about why certain doors closed without explanation. But every quiet ending and every unanswered question is part of a greater alignment that your mind may not yet understand, because God sees the full map while you can only see the next step, and sometimes the most loving thing He can do is ask you to trust Him without giving you the entire picture. And if you are listening closely, you may notice that even though life feels still, your inner world is changing, your patience is being stretched, your discernment is sharpening, your faith is being refined, and your heart is learning how to surrender control without losing hope. And this is not accidental, because before God aligns external paths, He always aligns the internal posture of your soul, teaching you how to walk in faith instead of force, in trust instead of anxiety, and in obedience instead of desperation. And this is why things may feel slower than you want, because speed can ruin what silence is meant to perfect. And while you may be tempted to question why others seem to move ahead while you feel paused, remember that God does not measure progress by visibility, He measures it by readiness, and what He is preparing for you requires depth, stability, and spiritual maturity that cannot be rushed. And during this silent alignment you may notice repeated signs urging you to let go, to forgive, to rest, or to step away from what once consumed your energy, because alignment is not only about moving forward, it is also about releasing what pulls you off course, and God will often remove distractions before He reveals direction, because clarity cannot exist where attachment dominates, and even though letting go feels like loss in the moment, it is actually space being created for something far greater than what you are releasing, and the silence you are walking through is not empty, it is full of unseen movement, like roots growing underground before a tree ever breaks the surface. And just as a seed must remain buried in darkness before it can rise into the light, your season of quiet preparation is necessary for the strength, endurance, and purpose that will soon emerge through you. And this is why you are being asked to wait without understanding, to trust without proof, and to believe without evidence, because faith is not built when everything makes sense. It is built when you choose to stand firm even when answers are delayed. And if you have felt drawn toward prayer, reflection, or solitude lately, this is not coincidence, it is invitation, because God often draws us inward before He leads us outward, teaching us how to hear His voice above the noise of expectation, comparison, and fear. And in this stillness He is gently realigning your desires so that what you want begins to match what He has planned. And this alignment is subtle, almost unnoticeable at first. But one day you will look back and realize that the silence saved you from rushing into Situations that would have broken you, attached you to people who could not walk with you into your next chapter, or trapped you in cycles that looked comfortable but limited your growth. And even though it may feel lonely at times, understand that loneliness is not the same as abandonment, because God often isolates before He elevates, not to harm you, but to protect the purity of what He is building through you. And during this time you are learning how to stand on your own faith instead of leaning on external validation, and this independence is crucial, because where God is taking you, you will need confidence rooted in truth, not approval rooted in opinion, and the reason everything feels quiet right now is because God is removing confusion so that when the alignment is complete, your next steps will feel undeniable, peaceful, and clear, and you will move not from pressure, but from purpose, not from fear, but from faith, and not from urgency, but from divine timing. As this silent alignment continues, you may notice that your tolerance for certain environments, conversations, and behaviors is quietly fading. Things that once felt normal now feel heavy, draining, or misaligned, and this inner discomfort is not weakness, it is awareness, because when God begins to realign your path, He heightens your sensitivity to what does not belong in your future. And without dramatic events or loud warnings, He gently pulls your spirit away from places that no longer serve your calling, and you may find yourself withdrawing without fully knowing why, declining invitations that once excited you, or losing interest in pursuits that once defined you, and this is not you becoming distant, this is you becoming directed, because alignment requires separation, and separation often happens first internally before it ever shows externally. And while others may not understand your silence or your changed energy, God understands it perfectly, because He is the one reshaping your priorities, recalibrating your focus, and teaching you how to move according to His rhythm rather than the world's expectations. And during this time you may feel misunderstood, unseen, or even forgotten, but what you do not see is that heaven is paying close attention, because seasons of preparation are always quieter than seasons of manifestation, and the most powerful shifts often occur when no one is applauding, no one is watching, and no one is validating your journey, and this is where true alignment is tested. Because will you continue to trust God when there is no external confirmation, when prayers seem unanswered, when progress feels invisible, and when the only reassurance you have is a deep inner knowing that you are being guided even though the path ahead is still hidden? And this is exactly where faith matures, because faith that depends on signs is fragile, but faith that survives silence is unshakable. And God knows that what He is preparing to align in your life will require resilience, discernment, and emotional stability, not impulsiveness or desperation, and this is why He allows the quiet to linger, because silence exposes what noise conceals, it reveals fears you didn't know you had, attachments you didn't realize controlled you, and expectations that were limiting your growth. And instead of removing these things instantly, God allows you to sit with them, confront them, and release them willingly, because forced change rarely lasts, but surrendered change transforms deeply, and as you release control, you may begin to feel a strange mixture of peace and uncertainty, a calmness that does not come from knowing the outcome, but from trusting the one who holds it. And this peace is a sign that alignment is happening, because when God is involved, even waiting carries a sense of purpose. And even uncertainty holds a quiet confidence, and you may notice that while nothing dramatic seems to be happening externally, your inner dialogue is changing, you are less reactive, more reflective, less fearful, more observant, and less driven by urgency. because God is teaching you that what is meant for you will not require force, chasing, or constant anxiety, and this lesson is crucial, because when the alignment is complete, what enters your life will arrive naturally, without resistance, without confusion, and without needing you to abandon your values to keep it, and the silence you are walking through right now is preparing you to recognize what is truly aligned when it appears, because not everything that looks good is God-sent, and not everything that feels exciting is divinely appointed, and discernment is sharpened in quiet seasons, not chaotic ones, and you may also notice that certain memories, emotions, or unresolved wounds are resurfacing during this time. Moments from your past coming back into your awareness without warning, and this is not to reopen pain, but to heal it fully, because alignment requires wholeness, and God will not build your future on unhealed foundations, and while revisiting old emotions may feel uncomfortable, it is actually a sign that you are strong enough now to face what once overwhelmed you, and God is guiding you to release emotional baggage that would interfere with where you are going, because you cannot carry yesterday's wounds into tomorrow's blessings. And the silence gives space for this healing to happen. Gently, without pressure, without performance, and without comparison, and if you have felt more introspective lately, questioning your purpose, your direction, or even your faith, understand that these questions are not signs of doubt, they are signs of growth, because faith that has never been questioned has never been strengthened, and God is not threatened by your questions, He welcomes them, because they lead you closer to truth. And as you sit in this quiet alignment, you are learning how to listen, not just to God, but to yourself, to your intuition, to the subtle nudges that guide you away from harm and toward purpose, and this inner listening is essential, because when your paths finally align, you will need to recognize it without external validation, without constant reassurance, and without fear of missing out, and this is why the silence feels intense at times. Because it is stripping away dependency on noise so that you can walk confidently when clarity arrives, and one day, often, when you least expect it, something will shift, a conversation, an opportunity, a realization, or a moment of clarity that suddenly makes sense of everything you endured in the quiet, and you will realize that God was never late, never absent, and never indifferent. He was simply aligning every detail beyond your awareness, protecting you from what was not ready, and preparing you for what was meant to last. And as this alignment deepens, you may begin to realize that the silence you once resisted has slowly become a place of refuge, a sacred pause where your spirit can finally breathe without the constant pressure to perform, prove, or please, because when God is aligning your paths, He often removes the noise of external expectations so you can hear the truth of who you are becoming, and in this quieter space you may notice that your reactions are softer, your responses are wiser, and your sense of urgency has been replaced by a steady trust that what is meant for you cannot miss you, and this shift is subtle but profound, because it signals that you are no longer operating from fear of lack but from confidence in divine provision, and while the world teaches you to chase, compete, and rush, God teaches you to wait, observe, and align, because alignment is not about speed, it is about positioning. And being in the right place at the right time matters far more than arriving early or forcing outcomes that your soul is not ready to sustain. And during this season you may find that your prayers are changing, they are no longer filled with demands for immediate answers but are becoming conversations rooted in trust, surrender, and openness, and this evolution in prayer reflects an evolution in faith, because mature faith does not insist on control, it rests in assurance, and God responds differently to surrendered hearts than to anxious ones, because surrender creates space for Him to move freely without resistance, and this is why certain delays begin to make sense only in hindsight, because what felt like rejection was actually redirection, what felt like loss was actually liberation, and what felt like stillness was actually recalibration. And you may also notice that people who once played central roles in your life are slowly fading into the background, not through conflict or drama, but through quiet distance, and this is often one of the most painful aspects of alignment. Because human connections carry emotional weight, memories, and attachment, but God sometimes removes people gently so that you are not distracted by nostalgia when it is time to move forward. But God sometimes removes people gently so that you are not distracted by nostalgia when it is time to move forward. And this does not mean those connections were meaningless, it means they were seasonal, and seasons end not because they failed, but because they fulfilled their purpose. And learning to honor endings without resentment is part of spiritual maturity. Because holding on to what has ended can block what is trying to enter, and while this process may feel lonely at times, it is actually creating room for deeper, more aligned relationships to form, connections rooted in mutual growth, respect, and purpose rather than convenience or familiarity. And this is why God aligns paths in silence, because loud transitions invite confusion, resistance, and unnecessary interference, but quiet shifts allow transformation to occur naturally, without force or explanation. And as you move through this season, you may also feel an increased pull toward authenticity, a desire to live more honestly, speak more truthfully, and show up as your real self rather than a version shaped by survival or approval. And this desire is not random, because alignment requires integrity, and God cannot build a future on a foundation of pretense, and the silence gives you the courage to confront who you have been, who you pretended to be, and who you are truly meant to become. And this self-awareness may be uncomfortable at times, because growth often requires confronting patterns, habits, and beliefs that once protected you but now limit you. And instead of judging yourself for these realizations, you are being invited to release them with compassion, because God does not expose to shame, He exposes to heal. And every moment of clarity you experience in this quiet season is another piece falling into place, another internal alignment preparing you for external manifestation. And you may notice that your definition of success is changing. It is no longer solely about achievement, recognition, or material gain, but about peace, purpose, and alignment with your values. And this shift is crucial, because what God is preparing to bring into your life will not come at the cost of your inner peace, and if it does, it is not aligned. And this discernment is one of the greatest gifts of the silent season, because it protects you from mistaking chaos for destiny. And as you continue to walk through this quiet alignment, trust that even the days that feel uneventful are carrying meaning, because consistency in faith during stillness is what builds strength for movement when direction becomes clear. And one day, when the silence finally breaks, you will step forward not as someone seeking validation or direction, but as someone grounded, prepared, and confident, knowing that every quiet moment, every unanswered prayer, and every delayed outcome was shaping you for something that required patience, depth, and unwavering trust. And as this divine alignment moves closer to completion, you may begin to sense a quiet confidence growing within you, not the loud kind that seeks attention or validation, but a grounded certainty that remains steady even when circumstances are uncertain. because when God aligns your paths in silence, He replaces fear with knowing, and this knowing does not come from evidence or reassurance, it comes from repeated moments of inner peace that arrive without explanation. Moments where you suddenly feel okay even though nothing around you has changed, and this peace is one of the clearest signs that alignment is taking place, because peace is not the absence of struggle, it is the presence of trust, and God never leads through chaos, He leads through clarity that settles gently in the heart, and during this time you may notice that you are no longer fighting the process as much as you once did, you are no longer constantly asking when, how, or why, but are learning to rest in the unfolding. Understanding that timing is not about delay but about precision, and divine precision cannot be rushed, because every detail matters, every encounter matters, and every step must meet you when you are ready to receive it fully, and this readiness is not about perfection, it is about alignment, and alignment happens when your inner world and outer direction begin to move in harmony, and this is why God often waits until your desires are purified, until your motives are clear, and until your heart is stable enough to hold what He is about to place in your hands, and you may realize that earlier versions of you would have mishandled what you are now being prepared for, not out of failure, but out of immaturity, fear, or unhealed wounds, and instead of regretting the past, you are beginning to feel gratitude for the protection that delay provided, because what arrives too early can become a burden rather than a blessing, and God is too intentional to allow that, and as this understanding deepens, you may find yourself trusting endings you once resisted, accepting closed doors you once knocked on endlessly, and releasing outcomes you once tried to control, because you now recognize that alignment means not every door is meant to open, and not every path is meant to be taken, and this discernment is a sign of growth, because clarity is not found by exploring every option, but by recognizing which options drain your spirit rather than nourish it. And during this season you may also experience moments of sudden insight, realizations that arrive quietly but change everything, where you suddenly understand why certain relationships did not work, why certain plans failed, or why certain prayers were answered differently than you expected, and these moments do not come with emotion or drama, they come with calm acceptance, because understanding no longer feels painful when healing has taken place, and God often waits until you are emotionally ready before revealing the meaning behind your past. Because revelation without healing can reopen wounds, but revelation paired with peace brings closure, and as these insights settle within you, your faith becomes less fragile and more resilient, because it is no longer dependent on outcomes, but anchored in trust, and this kind of faith does not collapse under uncertainty, it remains steady even when the future is unclear, and this steadiness is essential, because when alignment is complete, movement will come quickly, and you will need stability to navigate it wisely, and you may notice that opportunities begin to appear subtly, not dramatically, not with force, but naturally, conversations align, timing feels right, doors open without struggle, and things that once required effort now unfold with ease, and this ease is not coincidence, it is confirmation, because what is aligned does not fight you, it flows with you, and while challenges may still arise, they will no longer feel confusing, because clarity brings confidence, and confidence allows you to face obstacles without losing direction, and this is how you will know that the silence was not wasted, because when movement begins, it will feel purposeful rather than rushed, and guided rather than forced, and you will realize that God was never withholding from you, He was preparing you, shaping your character, refining your patience, and strengthening your faith so that when the path finally aligned, you could walk it with grace rather than fear. And this is why silence was necessary, because noise distracts, pressure distorts, and impatience misleads, but quiet alignment brings wisdom, depth, and readiness. And as you stand on the edge of this new chapter, trust that what is unfolding is not random, it is intentional, and every step ahead is supported by the unseen work that took place when no one was watching, when nothing seemed to be happening, and when you chose to trust God even when you could not trace Him.